Hey everyone, welcome back to the Career Discovery Sessions. If you're new here, this is a platform where you can find out about different careers by speaking to inspiring individuals with very different job roles. And it should hopefully help you with your own career choices in the future. Thank you for being here. This week we have Ben Evans, who is a specialist consultant for NGO and NPO regulations, as well as international regulations.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Ben Evans. Thank you to Simona for the opportunity to speak with you all today. My job is I am the director and co-founder of a consultancy called Greenacre, and we work specifically in the area of NGO regulation. I'm going to use the term NGO, different terms are used, and in the UK we call them charities, but I'm talking about charities, NGOs, NPOs. I work on their regulations, specifically on international rules which exist, which relate to standards that governments have to follow on NGO regulation. There are a set of international rules that are set by a body called the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, which is concerned about stopping money laundering and terrorist financing. And they set rules for the whole financial sector, for banks and for companies and for all sorts of organizations, including for NGOs. These rules have to be followed by governments, and governments are assessed. And my job is helping governments understand what those rules are and helping them meet those standards, but also to work with the NGOs themselves and help them understand what the rules are and how they can help governments to comply and make sure that their interests are looked after. And also working directly with FATF and with other international bodies like the UN or the World Bank or the IMF to help them understand the concerns of NGOs and how the rules that they're making may affect them and how they could be made to be more effective or better tailored to the problems that exist or to the solutions that actually work in dealing with these issues.
Do you think the NGOs struggle more with the regulations put on them than other sectors such as finance and banking?
That's an interesting question. Do they struggle more? Some do, yes. I think what I would say is certainly the financial sector faces incredibly complex and detailed regulations which are imposed upon it by governments, and many of which follow the rules that are set by FATF, this international body. But of course, you know, financial institutions are very often very large and wealthy organizations, and are capable of meeting those requirements. For NGOs, many of them are quite small. I mean, the vast majority, something like in the UK, for example, of the registered charities, 160,000 registered charities, something like 80% of them have an income of less than £10,000 a year. So, you know, they're not going to have professional staff. They're not going to have staff. So to impose burdensome regulations on those NGOs as if they were a bank is completely ridiculous. You can't expect them to follow that. So I think that's the thing that we have to take into account is that the proportionality of it and the ability of these very, very small organizations to meet some of these regulations is difficult. What I would say, I mean, we talk about the government regulations, and in the UK, the problem isn't too bad. In other countries, it varies. Increasingly, it's actually the regulations that are being put on the banks, which are making the banks want to get rid of the NGOs as customers, which is making it very hard for the NGOs to then operate because they can't open bank accounts or they can't move money. So that's actually one of the big areas where there are real problems.
Mm-hmm. And is this part of the reason that you decided to work in the field? And could you elaborate?
My decision, I've ended up in a very specialized area. I mean, the specific work that I do, which is working on this intersection between charities, NGOs, and governments and intergovernmental agencies. There's two of us who do this in the world, as far as I know. There's me and my partner. There are other specialists of different kinds of NGOs that work in this area a bit, but it's really a very small niche that we work in. So it was never something where I intended to get in. I wasn't like, as a young kid, I was interested in international financial regulations. Of course I wasn't. It was more that I got into the world of charity because of an interest I had. The first charity I worked for was an arts charity. And I worked there because I liked museums and I liked art galleries. So it was a nice place to go to work. And from that, I then found myself in this sector, and my career emerged because I'd had this specialism, which came from a completely different interest, a completely different area.
Mm-hmm. And what did you study at university, and do you think that helped you?
I studied history and philosophy. So at one level, it's completely irrelevant to the work that I do. And I do see people coming through who work in this area, who are in this field, who work, for example, in international development, who've done their degrees in international development or international relations, or perhaps in financial areas as well. But that's not the only route in. Obviously, the specifics, the content of my course have had no direct relevance to the work that I do. But I think it's about skills. I mean, both history and philosophy, what they're doing is they take a particular content, but they're teaching you a certain set of skills. They're teaching you the ability to analyze, the ability to balance arguments, the ability to present those arguments or to present that analysis in a compelling way. And those are all skills which are absolutely vital to the work that I do.
And would you go back and study anything else if you could?
I didn't particularly enjoy philosophy, so if I could do it again, I think I would probably have done history and politics, but that's nothing really to do from the career point of view. I think politics would have been slightly more relevant to my career, but I don't think it would make a big difference to me being where I am. I think the thing is when I left school, I didn't have a clear career plan. I didn't have a clear idea of what it is I wanted to do. When I was at university, I didn't have a particularly clear career plan. It wasn't like this is the sector, the industry that I want to be working in. There were things I was interested in. I was always interested in politics. I was interested in international politics and international relations. But I was interested in a whole range of other things. So I think, so it was never a case and so because there hasn't been that direct link through, I don't think it was, I mean, I could have done international relations or politics, and that would have been a bit more helpful. But yeah, like I say, I mean, because it wasn't a deliberate choice, it's difficult for me to say that I would have done anything differently. I don't, there are times, there's the occasional bit of work that comes along, for example, sometimes if you're tendering for research projects, for example, which are more academic in their nature, is a small part of my work, but sometimes comes along and they want to see a postgraduate degree in a relevant subject. And this is not something that I can meet. So then I sometimes think, well, maybe I should have done a master's in international development or something. But whilst that would be a handy thing to do, that's not something I could have known at that stage when I was at university. And I think for me at that time, it was the right decision to make.
Right. And what were your first steps? You spoke about working in an art gallery charity. Mm-hmm. So what other work experiences or just general experiences did you have that led you to the place you are now?
When I was 16 or so, my mum was always worried that I was fundamentally lazy and would avoid work. So she always used to find various different ways of pressuring me into doing jobs. So I've done a whole series of different types of work. I've worked in a meat factory. I worked in an amusement arcade. I worked as a telephone operator for British Telecom. I did various temp jobs. I once cleaned palm trees in a shopping centre. Done a whole bunch of different things. The thing about all of those things is none of them were directly relevant to the career path I'd taken, but they did kind of frame my understanding of what work was like, because I had to do a whole bunch of, low-level jobs, no job security, poor pay, often quite boring work. I did 12-hour night shifts. I've done a whole bunch of different things. But what that does, I think, make you realize is what a good job is when you have it. And so when I left university, I had no clear idea of what I wanted to do. I knew things that I was interested in, and I was unemployed. And then I literally started working in the arts charity because there was an advert in the newspaper saying they were employing. So I went along and I did the interview and I got the job. And I knew that it was a job that I liked because I'd done these other jobs, many of which were quite horrible. And so I recognized a job that was actually, which was good.
So I think what is really important for the students is, I guess, trying out different things and seeing what you like, but not only what you like, but also what you dislike. And let's speak about now. What motivates you to do this work and to keep going back to work and to enjoy the career path you've taken?
It's difficult motivating yourself. It's difficult. Interestingly, it's my own business. I don't have a boss telling me what to do. So the only motivation does come directly from me. And if I want to take the day off, I can take the day off. You know, there's no one stopping me. So making yourself sit down and do it can sometimes be difficult. What motivates me, I would say there's three things. One is it's a varied job. It's varied and interesting. So the job involves a lot of travel, and I've been traveled all over the world. I've been to lots and lots of different countries, some quite obscure places, and that still excites me. When I have the opportunity to go to a new place, I'm still excited by that, and that still, you know, energizes me to be in those circumstances and to be in those countries, particularly if I'm doing trainings and those kinds of interactions. Is something that is good. A second thing, relating to the training and to the direct interaction with people, it's something that can be missed when you're sat down at the table just writing or doing stuff, going through your emails, or the more administrative side of things. It can be boring, but when you have the opportunity to share or to demonstrate your expertise in something, that's a really satisfying feeling. So, I mean, I've been doing this work, I've said it's a really kind of niche area, and I've been working in this area now for 17 years. So I know a lot about it. I mean, the reason there's no one else who's really been doing this work in this area as long as I have. So when I'm in circumstances where I'm in a conference or a meeting or doing a training where I've become reminded of the fact that I've become good at this. And that, that I have an expertise which I can share with people, and that's a very satisfying thing. It kind of, I mean, there's a certain amount of, there's a pride in that. You're feeling important, but it's nice to have a job where you're able to take satisfaction in your own achievements, your own ability. That's the second thing. And the third thing is, and having done a lot of those other jobs I mentioned beforehand, and having worked in the corporate sector, I remember when I was your age, one of the things that I thought would motivate me a great deal was money. I was really interested by the idea of making a lot of money. But actually, when I started working in and I have done jobs for big companies, I found that temperamentally it didn't suit me. I was always quite irritated by the fact that I was getting paid this rubbish wage, and meanwhile some people were making huge profits, and which is one reason why I like owning my own business. But also I like working in this sector because I'm working with NGOs, with charities, and I know that my work is helping these organizations whose purpose is to make the world better, is to do good things. And although I'm quite far removed very often from the reality of that, there are occasions here and there where I see this work being done at first hand. I remember a few years ago, I was in Pakistan, and we went to, we spent most of our time talking to government officials, conference rooms with government officials, but then we went to visit a charity, a hospital, where they were dealing with blood disorders amongst the poor people of Pakistan. And then you kind of think, well, this is why we're doing it. We're trying to help these guys do things which help this charity do its job more effectively. And you saw the difference, like a pound could save somebody's life for this organization. When you kind of see that thing directly, then you realize, yeah, that fundamentally, although it's quite removed, you are doing something which hopefully is making the world better.
Mm-hmm. So obviously your job is very important, and not to build the competition, but what would you say to the future students who might be going into this path? Would you encourage them to take this path into this sector and to do what you do now?
Well, I kind of I'm in a bridge between two sectors. I'm partly government sector, I'm partly NGO sector.
Right.
I've worked for both government and I've worked for NGOs. I think working for NGOs can be an extremely rewarding, personally rewarding work to do. And it's a wonderful sector to work in, but it pays badly. And the stresses of it are quite intense. So I think it's something where if you really, it's you know, it's the kind of work which is almost more vocational, because you really have to believe in what you're doing, because it's going to ask quite a lot of you and not necessarily give you that much in return in ways of financial compensation, but will give you returns in terms of feeling like you're making a positive difference. So if you really care about something, if you're devoted to a particular cause, then working in the NGO sector is a really satisfying thing to do. Working for government is very different. I mean, it's a safe job. A lot of it is quite routine and boring. A lot of it is, you know, somewhat, a lot of the people who work there aren't necessarily the most highly motivated people in the world. But what I found when I was there is if you go into government and you have ability and energy, even if you don't particularly know what you want to do, it can be a really good place to rise. I mean, I went into the Charity Commission, which is the NGO regulator here, at a kind of fairly low level, and managed by application and by energy to kind of like find some really, really interesting work there. And then in the end, I was able to, you know, it turned into a fascinating and varied and impactful job from what was initially get a file, open it up, read the letter, answer the questions, move on, next file. I then found myself within 4 or 5 years in a situation where I was representing the British government in conferences around the world and dealing directly with different governments and with different NGOs. And it was varied and fascinating and fun. And it was because, you know, and there was hundreds of people working in the organization, and there was 4 of us who ended up doing that job. And it was because, and if you had the ability, if you had the drive, it can be a good place to kind of find your way to something better. So I think it can, if you're not sure, I think government can be quite a good place to start.
I think in government, you have to make your own opportunities. So you've obviously done that and you've taken your own branch. And I've spoken to some other people who also done a similar thing. So what do you think students need to take away from this is from your experiences?
I think one of the things, I remember what it was like being your age. I had no idea what I wanted to do in terms of career. I had some very kind of fuzzy ideas about that. And the other thing was, when you asked me what kind of careers, you know, when you ask a 16 or 17-year-old, you know, what career are you interested in, you're still, you know, if you're going to go to university, if you're going to do a master's, you're still some years from actually entering the job market. And the job market changes so much, society changes so much. My job doesn't exist if 9/11 didn't happen. You know, these external influences, this created a huge industry related to terrorist financing, which is where my work then ended up coming into. My job did not exist when I was at university. My job didn't exist when I started working in government. And yet that's what my job became. And so I think I wouldn't fret too much if you don't have a very clear career plan at your age. I think you have to find the things that you're interested in. And I ended up going down what I did because these things interested me. You know, the charity world interested me and the international world interested me. If you have the skills, which I think university can provide you with, those transferable skills can be really important. But then it's about applying them. It's about seeing the opportunities. It's about setting yourself up to take the opportunities when they arrive. I mean, I mentioned that, you know, the international work I started doing this international work whilst working within government. You know, there were 200, 300 staff in my government department at that time when these jobs were offered. And if those 200 or 300 staff, maybe 20 applied for it, you know, and of those 20 that applied, you know, only 4 of us got it. You've got, you know, but, you know, I spoke to people who would complain saying, oh, that's a really good job you've got there. And it's like, you know, you're so lucky. And I was like, did you apply? And they were like, no. What, you know, what do you expect? You've got to, you know, it's about taking those opportunities when they arrive as well. So I wouldn't, like I say, I wouldn't worry about having a fixed path. Concentrate on what you're interested in. Think about the skills that you can get. And then just see what opportunities arise and take them when they do.
Thanks so much for watching today's career discovery session. This will be really useful to you if you want to go into international relations or politics, or the charity sector. I will see you next week with a completely different individual in a completely different field. Bye.